Welcome to the Deeks.ai podcast, where Wake Forest innovators unpack the real-world magic of artificial intelligence through candid conversations. I'm Michael Ferrari.
I'm Ryan Scholl.
Please join us as we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming work across campus, one fascinating story at a time.
Would you intentionally add slang to your term paper to dodge a flawed AI detector? Wake Forest senior Alexander Sun would. Straight from the front lines of campus life, he breaks down the game of high-stakes academic chicken being played in classrooms today, and he's bringing his text messages as receipts. From 3 a.m. study sessions with digital tutors to shifting office hours and student motivation, he describes what it takes to survive in today's college environment.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Deeks.ai, still the #1 higher education artificial intelligence podcast at Wake Forest University. We are, again, working on our student series. Today, we have a senior with us, Alexander Sun. He is an econ major and a history minor, and he's going to tell us a little bit about how he uses AI, maybe general feelings about how students use it, what the future of higher education looks like. So he's joining Michael and I to give us a candid conversation today. Alex, welcome to the show, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you for having me. I'm currently an economics major. I'm from New Jersey, and I think I'm definitely just excited to be here and talk about just my experiences, because I think it's definitely been something that's impacted not only just my education, but also just my personal life and my journey so far.
So I think in our previous conversations, you would kind of put yourself as AI neutral, maybe AI moderate, maybe leaning a little more towards AI forward. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I would say so. I think definitely, I'm realistic about how some of the uses of AI can be, a bit extensive, or, a bit, like, for lack of better words, not the best for like educational purposes.
Mhm.
But I also think it's something that, I personally think should be like adapted to, because I think at the end of the day, if it's something that everybody's going to use, I think people should learn how to use it, and also learn how to make the best of it. Because I think, for me, I think of AI kind of like similar to any technology that has emerged in the past like 20 something years. Because at the end of the day, like, when the internet first came out, right, people were probably really concerned about its uses, but now it's like
That was over 20 years ago.
yeah, exactly. So, it's one of those things where it's really something that I think people should learn how to use, and be, I think, optimistic about, because if you're not optimistic about it and you completely shut it off and don't give it a chance, then I think, you're not going to be able to adjust to what everybody else is.
What's your go-to AI app on your phone?
I would say I'm still pretty basic with it. I think ChatGPT is still the one that I have on my phone. I think I gotta branch out a little bit myself.
Are you in a dorm room or do you have an off-campus apartment?
So I think it's technically considered on campus, but it's a Deacon Place. So I think it's on campus, considered on campus student apartments, but it is I have my own room. So
Would you want a humanoid robot living in your dorm room?
I mean, that might be a bit crazy, I think, at the moment. I think that maybe that's something that's common by, 2060 or something, that you just, I mean,
2060.
I don't know. I'm just putting
Dude,
numbers
that's
out.
coming a lot quicker than you think it's
I know. But, I think I also honestly, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, didn't think that a lot of people would be using something like AI to, do various things for them. So I think, at the end of the day, I think it's just a sign that I think we're actually doing a lot more like technological advancements than
Mhm.
I think people really realize. Like, I think like innovation is really improving. So I think, that could happen by 2060. I mean, honestly, I'm just guessing, but I think it's something, I think it's a good question, because it's kind of, I think, gauging people's comfort with like how intrusive technology can be in your like, personal life.
Fair enough. We've heard from a lot of brilliant professors. We've heard from some of our staff. We've heard from some other students. We we're trying to learn more about student perceptions. Can you tell us the general perception of students on campus towards artificial intelligence? Most students more in the experimentation phase, or are they heads down, knowing how to use it, really accelerating their usage? What is the general perception, and how do you think they're using it? I mean, is everybody using it, or is it a select handful?
I would say, like at least in my personal experience from people that I've talked to or what I've seen, I think it's a pretty common practice now. I think other people are probably using it more than others, but I think it's something that everybody has kind of realized is kind of here to stay. So it's
Mm.
definitely something where I think some students are using it, like a lot, like where to the point where it's almost like a reliance. But I think other students are kind of using it just as like a tool, which is why I think, I at least treat it as something that I'm optimistic about. And I think a bit more leaning towards like the pro like AI use in the future. Because specifically for me, at least, I have used like AI in the past to, brainstorm ideas or to even like make study guides, etc. Like I think that's something that I think it's really good at because it's able to, if you give it like, a certain amount of like data and just feedback from like maybe, the Canvas site, it can create that study guide for you in the instances where like a professor hasn't. And, it can, create quiz questions for you, etc. So I think it's a good study tool that I at least think, in a time crunch, I can definitely use because, in the instances where a professor hasn't made that for you, like being able to have that, when you're, studying the night before, which, I don't recommend, but, uh, I can't say I haven't done that before, but like, I think also other students, right, they, might use it to, brainstorm ideas for like writing a paper or something, or they might just use it, for like personal uses. Like I've heard people actually say that they've told their like personal problems to ChatGPT, and I guess that substitutes for like a therapist. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's something where some students might be using it in a way that I think professors might not like as much, but I think others are using it, and I think what I think is like a useful way that, if you have like tools that are like at your disposal, I think you might as well take advantage of that opportunity.
What do you think the general feelings of professors are about using generative AI for teaching and learning?
Yeah, I think that very varies, honestly, not only by like the subject that the
Hmm.
professors are teaching, but I
Yep.
think also just the professors like own personal experiences. So like for example, like I've had econ professors that are actually like I think a bit more optimistic about AI use and like recognizing that for like professional development or like pre-professional development, like before going into the workforce, that's something that like we should have practice with.
Hmm.
Like obviously they're not saying like, oh yeah, you can just, take out your phone and use you know, like AI in situations where like it's like in class and like, probably like a test or something. But like I think they're saying like for like problem sets and like homework, this is something that you can consult. And obviously I think they've also, warned us about, how accurate it can or cannot be. Like it's not a 100%
Hmm.
accurate system, but I think it's also something that can definitely be helpful, and I think some professors encourage it, while I think I've had personal experience, for example, where like if I'm taking more of like a humanities course, I think, for example, if it's, history or English, it's almost like a like, they from day one they're setting the tone of like we can't have this
Mhm.
used at all. Like I've had one English professor that actually allowed us to use like I think it was Gemini to like generate like an AI picture, just
Hmm.
I think, and it was like a fun homework assignment just to I guess give us that like practice with it. But I think other professors have been like, we're gonna do the Salem witch trial all over again if we catch you using AI.
So we've had a couple of professors come on and discuss an approach that they use called the stoplight approach, and it's very popular around higher education as well. But it's red, yellow, green. You know, absolutely do not use artificial intelligence for this assignment or this part of the assignment. Yellow, yeah, you can use it. Beware, maybe not the best use case. Green, yes, use it. It'll help you. It'll give you more abilities than that. So, you know, yes, use it here. Maybe not use it here. Absolutely don't use it here. Do you feel that is more of the approach of certain professors, or do you think it's all or nothing for most professors?
Um, yeah, I mean, I definitely, at least in my personal experience, maybe that's like a new one that professors are now implementing, just because I think AI has probably gotten even more popular than when it was
Hmm.
first introduced to me in like, like 2023 per
Hmm.
se. But I think in my experience with my professors, I think a lot of them have said like, either AI is not your friend or we will be like, using it very limitedly.
Hmm.
Or yeah, like we'll have a very limited use of it in this class. So I think, at the end of the day, most professors are probably more leaning towards the idea that, whatever class they're teaching, that it should only have like, some like a rare like use by the
Hmm.
students, because I think for them, I think they're definitely worried about the opportunity cost that comes with using AI more, and whether that you know either limits the education that we're taking away, or if people will take advantage of that in a way that for them is probably violating some sort of moral boundary.
So you've mentioned your two fields of study, economics and history.
Yeah.
Maybe compare and contrast how you've used artificial intelligence in those two fields, and maybe the professors' um, attitudes and feelings and assignments towards those.
Yeah, for sure. I think economics is definitely, for me, I think closer to kind of like, the STEM field than, history. I don't know if that's like a hot take or anything. I think for me, economics has been a very challenging major. And I think for me, when I haven't had like the opportunity to go to like office hours, or if I am struggling with a concept and it's like, 11 p.m. at night, I think sending an email at that time, might not be for me in like the most ideal circumstance,
Hmm.
especially like I mentioned before, if I have a test the next day at
Right.
like 8 a.m. So I think those times I've found myself consulting like AI resources to either explain a concept to me,
Hmm.
or to like create like a study guide where it's doing a step-by-step process of like previous questions that the professor has gone over either in class or whatever. But I think for me, I've definitely um had it help me for like study for tests more often, both honestly in history and economics, just because I think for me I found the best usage for AI is for those study guides. And
Hmm.
they oftentimes like with ChatGPT especially, they ask like, do you want to turn it into like flashcards, or do you want
Hmm.
like extra questions that potentially could be asked that you can practice either memorizing or practice writing with, etc. And I think that's where I've used it. So that's where like the crossover kind of happens. But I think for history, I think it's a little different for sure, because I think for me, I've had a more, like I would say challenging time, honestly, like quite frankly, with economics, because I think
Mm.
it's just a very, like difficult major. Like I think there's just certain classes that have almost, just, completely wiped me out, mentally. But I think, with history, I think it's a lot more, um, I think it's a lot more subjective, to where like you can make arguments that aren't just like, it's not just one answer is right and the other isn't. Like I think you have the ability to make like subjective arguments. And I think for me specifically with history, I think I just because of like my experiences in the past with like extracurriculars and just like even high school history, I feel like I've just feel more comfortable being able to come up with things on the fly in like history, like if it's participating in class, or being able to brainstorm for an essay, versus like I think with economics it was something that I didn't have as much experience with until I came into college. So I think it's definitely something that whenever I can get some sort of guidance on it. Obviously I want to go to office hours like with these professors, but in the instances where that's not available, I think that's where I think AI has kind of been kind of filling the gap per se.
Interesting.
Do you think your viewpoint of it serving primarily as like a study guide and like using it for that purpose is how most students view it?
Um, I think is something that I think if I did like a hypothetical poll, I mean, maybe it'd be more like 55-45. I obviously can't, guess the exact numbers because I also
Sure.
think, if it's anonymous, I think students would be a lot more honest about it. But I think, quite frankly, I'm not, I guess I'm not, naive to the fact that I think, a decent amount of students, if, closed doors, nobody would find out. I mean, if they're in a time crunch, I think, they're definitely going to use it in ways that I think either, open up time for other things, maybe in
Mhm.
a, less ethical way, or, honestly, if they're just, in a very tight time crunch where they have to submit like a paper in like 2 hours and there's no like, extension that's like possible, I could, fully see someone just, going into one of those AI sources and just say, just
Mhm.
write me a 5-page paper. And I've definitely heard stories of students just, deciding to, go all in with that decision. And, whether or not they get, caught with it is, I obviously haven't heard that many stories about that because I think,
Yeah.
that would be something where like I guess you're just finding out that like every student that you know that's around you is just suddenly getting caught like writing or using like AI to write a paper. But I think it's something that, especially on social media, you see like, professors or students either trying to like accuse the other person of using AI, like where like even students will be like, yeah, professor, I know you wrote this whole lesson plan using ChatGPT. Like it still says like the feedback of like, hey, like whatever name, like this is the lesson plan. And like I think some professors are more tech savvy than others, to where, that wouldn't be an issue for them. But I think it's also the reverse where professors are like, this is 100% like AI written. And then some people would be like, no, that's just how I write. Like I use like, or they're like, oh yeah, like they used the EM dash or something. And the professor's like, nah, no shot. And, I think for me, it's definitely something where I think it's just kind of becoming like a game of like just trying to like get the other person, like, just trying to basically have the moral like high ground over the other person. And I think that's kind of like I think a shift in dynamics that's changed between like professors and students, not only at just at Wake, but also at other colleges, because it feels like kind of just like a game of chicken.
Now, from the student side, like say like a student who maybe uses it in a less ethical way, do you think that um do you think it's common for that to be like what their initial intent was from the beginning, or do you think it's more likely that I'm falling, behind on deadlines, I have a bunch of stuff going on, I'm working, have all this, and it's kind of like a last resort type of approach?
Yeah, I definitely think there's probably two camps of students when it comes to that. I think obviously we try to go to more towards I think the positive side of things, and I think for me I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I've heard actually like very I think intriguing situations where like students are managing like a lot more than I am just in terms of like personal life and extracurriculars. And they got this club meeting at 5. They have an intramural thing that's like 7 or something. They have their like sister's birthday at 9, and they just find themselves like so overwhelmed with things. Or if it's from like a financial point of view where they're working 2 jobs in one week because they need to help pay for tuition. Like I feel like those are situations where I think we can be having conversations about how to deal with those situations, because I think like I think especially at Wake Forest there's a very like rigorous environment, which encourages like us to be as proactive and be as active as possible when it comes to trying to manage these responsibilities, because it kind of serves as like preparation for how you'll have to manage the real world. Like you can't just decide not to do taxes. Like that's unless the IRS, unless you want to deal with the IRS, like that's its own story. But I think it's kind of something where I think that's just the mentality that students have at Wake Forest, and like I think also other really good colleges. And I think for me, it's definitely where I've heard things where it's like that's where students might decide they have no resort, they have no other option. They have to do it because otherwise they're going to fall too far behind. They're going to have to like either like withdraw from that semester, or like have to cut one of the things that is really important out of their lives, and they don't want to do that. So they end up, I think, potentially feeling like there's no other escape but consulting that last resort, and that that tool that can really help free up their schedule. But I think there's also, quite frankly, there's also the other campus students where I think they have just realized that this is something that will make it easier for them to do things that are more fun for them. Like obviously I think writing an English paper, for example, isn't everybody's best way to spend like a Friday afternoon. Like they'd rather on Thursdays go to the bars, and on Friday go to the frat parties. And I think for some of them, I think that's where they're like, what, like honestly, I think this assignment, like I could probably just get like a B on it, or get a C on it, and live with the consequences. But yeah, like I've like personally had or I've personally talked to people about like how they're managing like their schedules, because they either are taking a lot of classes, or they might just be just adapting to whatever their schedule is. And I think some people, they're like, oh yeah, I gotta lock in, I gotta be in the library for 6 hours. And I think I've heard other students just kind of give the answer of like, what, like I got like 50 assignments too, but what, chat's got it. Like there's there's just like there's just this like I think mentality with some students that it's basically their like best friend, and they're always coming in at the last second to hit a buzzer beater. But it's definitely I guess it's a long-winded answer, but to answer your question, I definitely think there's two like different parts of the student population that have different beliefs. Because I also have heard, like even on like a student panel about AI last semester, like there was like I think at least two students that were like, oh, I never use AI. Like they were like, this is the worst thing that could have possibly been introduced to society. And they were like, I think one of them was like a graduate student in English, and they were like, yeah, this is like an abomination to my future profession. And I was like, oh, I mean, fair enough. You're entitled to, your opinion about AI. And I think, they definitely were probably very proud of the work that they put in. And they feel like anybody that's in the same field as them and is using AI is probably, degrading their efforts and their experiences.
Is there anything in particular that you can think of possibly that kind of, I guess, like, is why you utilize AI the way you do, and why you lean more towards like study guides and stuff like that, opposed to like, hey, I'm just going to free up my schedule?
Yeah, and I want to add on to that question because, and please, if I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think we took an unintentional turn to point to the sort of shortcut use of AI and the work around AI, where in our previous conversations, you've talked about ways that you've used artificial intelligence to really supercharge your abilities or enhance your.
Yeah.
So to build on Michael's question, you've described ways that you've used it very differently than you've just talked about other students trying to get around assignments.
Yeah, because I think I think that the answer to that question that previously was asked was more so based on, I think, behind closed doors, or just if they're in a tight like deadline situation, like what their like mindset is like specifically. And I think I've definitely found myself in those situations. And I think the difference between what I did or just ended up deciding and what I think like other students might feel in certain situations is, for me, I ended up deciding to ask for extensions more so than anything for me, because I think I definitely had personal life stuff going on, and I think for me that was important to tell the professors. And I think
Sure.
a lot of I think I've been blessed that a lot of them understood that and were willing to grant me extensions. But I always thought that was the better decision than potentially ruining everything that like my parents had invested in me by deciding to try to take that shortcut and potentially not being able to kind of get away with that shortcut. But to kind of going back to the more like how I personally use it, I definitely think it is something that can enhance your learning and supercharge your learning, because like specifically like with AI, um, because it's like an automated thing. Like I think what it's really good at doing is taking out things that are redundant for you to do. Like I think if you are, for example, doing a homework assignment where a professor is encouraging you to use it for like your homework assignment, like they're not saying you can't use it. So maybe like you said, more of like the green light approach. Like I think for me, I found it very useful for me because in the instances where I'm analyzing, for example, a large amount of data, for example, having like a tool like ChatGPT has been really useful for me because it allows me to focus more on the things that require my own critical thinking, right? Like I think, like obviously, like it does require thinking to like analyze data, for example, but if you can have something that already does that for you, I think being able to focus more on the big picture and focus on how you're gonna for example, describe the results, or be able to give your conclusion in a way that's very well informed and very well articulated. That's something to where I think that's what like AI can definitely do, where it's not only helping take away things that probably prevent you from being able to like focus more on like developing like quality like arguments, or developing like quality skills like in that same amount of time, but also I think in a similar vein, like for me, I think it really supercharges my studying at an accelerated level, because it's giving me different like study options that I think I previously wouldn't have. Like I think previously I would just like stare at my notes that I had like scribbled during class and try to flip through those like an hour before the test. And I think those have yielded mixed results, to be honest. Like I definitely wouldn't say I'm repping a 4.0 GPA in college. It was different in high school, to be honest, which I think is funny. But it's honestly something to where I think college is definitely a lot harder than high school. And I think because of that, I think that not only the stakes have changed, but also the environment, the level of difficulty with your classes. So I think having something that can be in your corner, quote unquote, is definitely useful, because I think like at the end of the day, like AI is definitely something that people in their jobs are going to be using. And I've even found it to be present in like interviews, or even in just like my personal life. So I think it's something that definitely can supercharge like not only our learning, like y'all talked about, but also it's going to be a part of, I think, our professional lives as well.
Is
Mhm.
it fair to say that when you are in a field that you enjoy, so you really appreciate the subject matter, that you have a higher motivation to learn the material, whether it's on your own or using the tool rather than just skipping the assignment?
Yeah, 100%. I think um with those kind of situations, I think if you really enjoy the subject, like I think if you're passionate about something, I think you're definitely going to want to be obsessed with it. Like I think it's kind of I would compare that kind of thing to like sports, for example, right? Like I think
Mhm.
what you put in is what you're going to probably get as well. Like I think with basketball, like you have to be in the gym, and be putting up a lot of shots in order for, when it comes to game time, like for you to feel like really good about it. Like besides the fact that I'm not, 6'6". Like the other reason why I probably had no chance of playing college basketball was I probably just didn't practice enough, right? Like I liked playing basketball and, I played up until like high school, but for me, I think I just decided to go out in my backyard and, shoot hoops like when I wanted to. But I think it wasn't as much of a passion to where it became an obsession. Like I think,
Yeah.
that was something that I struggled with as a kid was like, I think I only just wanted to play the games. I didn't want to like put in the work during practice, but practice was really what's made the difference. And, to compare that analogy to like for example, a subject matter for something, the people that I think are obsessed with, like, let's just use English or history as an example, are probably going to be doing a lot more, like research and a lot more, like outside the classroom, like development and, putting in effort, in ways that like other students aren't. So I think that's
Yeah.
where, having AI can even accelerate that process even more because they're so excited about it. They're not only talking to like, for example, ChatGPT or Gemini about it, or they have 50,000 pages of notes in that notebook, like what's
Notebook LM.
yeah, notebook
Oh,
no,
come on.
yeah.
I made it probably through half an hour without saying it.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say no free shout outs, but
Well, now I gotta say, because I was keeping quiet about this, but you mentioned flashcards before, and Notebook LM does a great job with flashcards. So
Yeah, yeah.
okay, I'm done. I'm getting off the pedestal.
That's funny.
Let me put your analogy in another way too. Playing basketball, practicing versus the games. I would say that students, and you can tell me how you feel about this, but when you go to practice, you understand it makes you better. Take that practice analogy and make that an assignment. If you understand the assignment that the professor is given or why they're giving it, you're more likely to really want to buckle down and do that assignment and use all the tools at your discretion to really perform that assignment to the best of your ability because you understand what the end goal, what the learning objective of that assignment is, rather than potentially professor gives you assignment and you don't understand why you're receiving that. You think it's busy work and you just want to put the check in the box. And you do it however you can do it to get that check and move on.
Yeah. And I think that honestly, how much students care about those assignments, I think also depends on the weight that like professors put on those assignments. Like I think something that I've been seeing on like, TikTok and Instagram a lot, when it comes to that, like it isn't like all across my feed, but when I see it, like the comments are usually the same. This idea that you know, academics and just like life in general has become so gamified that people are less concerned about the actual educational value and learning, like and falling in love with the process. They're more just results oriented. They're just trying to get that A. They're just trying to get the 4.0 GPA. They're just trying to get the job. They don't care about the actual like subject matter, and they don't actually care about the things that come with the job, right? Like I think this is not for me something that I think isn't an unpopular notion. Like I honestly, maybe I'm just not talking to the right people, but I've yet to meet a certain amount of people that feel like accounting is something they're super passionate about. Like obviously it's a very, important skill to have, but I honestly, I guess I gotta, maybe like ask around and see which person's like, yeah, honestly, in my free time, I'm just ripping time. Like I'm just like watching YouTube videos about accounting, like
You do?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think for me, like, it's definitely I've been told how hard accounting is. So this is not
Yeah.
dissing that subject at all. But I think, it's really something to where because things are so gamified, people are less focused on the educational value of these assignments and of like, the class that they're taking. So I think as a result of that, I can see where students are more so just trying to get that check mark with the assignments. But I think the way to change that is probably to address it at its, at the root and be able to like articulate why doing these assignments in a certain manner is like so important. Like I think certain classes just have it where they have like one problem set that's right, before the exam comes out or something. And I think, they, usually those problem sets are a good, preparation for like a midterm or something. And usually the professors say this, but I think, certain students aren't thinking that it actually is going to be all that helpful. They're just thinking like, how can I just get the completion check on the assignment and then
Yeah.
actually do well on the test. And, I think probably the students that are doing really well on the, problem sets are probably doing really well on the test as well. But I think, it's just this like, this energy that I think students aren't, I think, correlating all the time because they're thinking like, this is just another assignment that's due at 11:59. They're not thinking, let me really like fall in love with the process of learning what, this current lesson is all about, or like what like the slides in class were
Yeah.
really trying to emphasize. Like I think people are less focused on like that aspect.
I love your sports that you brought up sports as an analogy because I actually one of my favorite things that I've ever heard about sports is I was listening to like a podcast or something. And if you follow sports, I'm sure you know a lot of times when these players get these big paydays, sometimes you see them kind of like check out or they fall off or they start getting into like trouble in their personal lives. And I can't remember right now who said it, but he said like when they get paid, like the money doesn't change them. It shows you who like they really were all along. Do you feel like maybe AI is kind of exposing parts of that with people in some regard too, where it's like exposing their lack of passion, like you were talking about, or, being here just for the checkbox opposed to actually, being immersed in it?
Yeah. Like I think it's kind of yeah, no, that really is a good point. Like I think there's a really good Marshawn Lynch quote out there, just I'm here so I don't get fined.
Yeah.
And honestly, I also think about like load management, honestly. Like, I think don't want to give too many strays to NBA players that I really, admire and I think are
Yeah.
like, top of the top talent in the world. But there are a certain amount of players that, they're making over, 100 million over like the next couple of years and they're sitting for like half the season.
Yeah.
And whether or not it's because they're, actually injured or just choosing not to play to, just be able to like show up come playoff time and try to,
Yeah.
win a championship. I think that's, something to where you can also, yeah, draw that same analogy to students. Like what's the effort level once they get, the job offer they really wanted, or what's their feeling when, it's their, maybe, end of junior year or start of senior year, they've already kind of got that 4.0. They've kind of already wrapped up, their job search. Like they've already got that nice job in banking, they're going to New York City,
Yeah.
etc. Like, is the passion level going to be the same, or are they just going to try to, coast their way, to the finish line? Because I think that's
Yeah.
something, that I've kind of, found myself talking to, like other people in my grade about is like, I've found myself, definitely hearing people say like I'm just trying to graduate at this point. Like,
Mhm.
there's
Yeah.
this like I think this level of like if I get a C on this assignment, it's whatever. C's get degrees. Like, it's definitely something to where I think with certain students at least, they've just kind of realized that the finish line is very close. And I don't think that necessarily like takes away their effort level on assignments, because I don't want to like just like say that like all students are lazy. Like I don't think that's true at all. But I think a lot of students, especially in my grade, I think are seeing that, the finish line is close. And I think that is impacting their like, I guess, passion to where they need to get
Mhm.
like a perfect score on this, or they need to be able to be the best at it at this time. Like I think it can take away like hunger level,
Mhm.
like in terms of like being able to like get after it. But I think I don't really know like how it fully um is applicable to AI, just because I think that can, manifest itself in ways where AI isn't being used. But I also think it can also be where, you can find, a student potentially just, deciding to see if they can get away with, having, ChatGPT write an assignment or something and then try to have like the edit level to where, it bypasses, all the detectors or something. Because I think most professors use Turnitin still. And usually it gives like a report of like how much they think it's AI used. But I think it's also I think that's also its own game in and of itself, because I think that also becomes where it could say 20% AI generated
Yeah.
content and the student could have completely written it on their own. And the professor's like, yeah, I think you used AI, like, it's curtains for you. And the student's like, wait, but no, like I can show you the edit history or something. And some professors, I not at Wake to my knowledge, but some professors are like, I don't want to hear it. I know this is 100%. Like you just were too lazy, you didn't put in the work, like blah blah blah, like you're a terrible student, etc. And then they find themselves like in front of like the honors counselor or something, or like whatever, which college they're at, like whatever the disciplinary like committee is, or system, and they find themselves like begging for their lives and being like please, like they're like, I'm 300K in student loan debt or whatever, and you're like threatening to take away my diploma. And I think that's just it's a really scary thing, because I think with AI, obviously I understand the concern from professors and administrators that students will try to, cheat the system, and, this is a form of academic integrity. But I also think as a result of that, there can be false positives. And when you have false positives, I think those are a very slippery slope. And I think it's a dangerous game to play, because, students are trying to, improve their futures. And I think for people to accidentally say something, or that might not be really the whole situation. I think in regards to like AI use, I think that can definitely be something to where I think there probably should be plenty of discourse among the professors and administrators about how to best manage it. And I think that's why it's so important to not only just have like, for example, a podcast like this, but to have these conversations, because I think otherwise you're having those conversations in real time, like in a situation that's more stressful, where a student's either trying to defend themselves, or a professor is trying to defend their not only their syllabus, but why they chose to give a student like a 0 on assignment. And I think that's not the time to have that conversation, because I think then you're only going to get one side of the story, and because of that, it's almost going to be like two passing ships. Like there's going to be no like full like interaction at all, and there's not going to be a unbiased comparative analysis between the two sources.
What do you think the punishment should be for using like AI? I'm just curious, because
Yeah.
because say one day you are an accountant and you're having trouble doing work, or you have facing a problem, like they're not showing up once you're in the professional world being like, hey, how's it going? How you doing? Do you need any help or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I definitely think there should be like a punishment depending on the severity of it. Like I think I think, for example, if it's like marginal use of AI to where like, the a professor has said like, like there shouldn't be any use at all, and they like maybe used it to like brainstorm their idea for like the paper. I think it's something to where you explain to them that this is not what you want, and that you should redo the assignment, and maybe there's like a small like grade deduction. But I think, for example, if someone like decided just like to go into ChatGPT and copy and paste the whole like essay that ChatGPT generated, and submit it on Canvas, I think that's to where like I think the punishment should be you get a 0 on the assignment. There's no like grade back or whatever, etc. There's no like extension that can be given, or no resubmission of the assignment. But I think it's almost I guess we'll go back to the sports analogies again. I think it's almost the same thing as like the targeting rule in college football, like to where if you get a flag for targeting, and they go to the review, and they find that they deem that targeting was happening, they not only eject the player for the game, but usually depending on like which half the targeting happens, the next half they're also not able to play. Like that's crazy, and it's a 15-yard penalty
So
on top of that.
you're gonna get 50% off your next grade too.
Yeah, like I think it's like, but the reason I say that is because I think the reason why that rule was implemented is for the safety of the players. And I think the safety of the players is important because you want to,
Yeah.
remove the effects of like CTE, for example. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I think football physically is a violent sport. And oftentimes, like certain accidents can happen to where the intention wasn't targeting, but like maybe they led with their shoulder and, the crown of the helmet just happened to be there. And I think that's unfortunate. But I draw that same analogy to how students can operate because, like, I think it's probably very, I think, scary for a student to potentially just have their whole life flipped on their head, and not be able to be like either eligible for, next semester, like maybe they have to take this semester off, which like throws their whole plans off, or, they could find themselves potentially getting kicked out of school and having to transfer to a school that maybe is less prestigious, or maybe having to go to, and community college is great, but like I think for certain students, right, like it's a hard fall to go from, like, for example, like Harvard, for example, and then going to your local community college and being like, yeah, I'm here because X, Y, and Z. Like I think that's for students hard to take in, and I think is probably a bit of a cruel punishment because I think with some students especially, right, context matters, right? Like what if they had a family member pass away and they were struggling to open up about it and they just decided, well, I still can't fail my assignments, like I got to just do something about it, like and obviously I think this might be excusing where students are just deciding like
Sure.
I got a party on Saturday, let me just get this essay done now and just plug it in. But like I also think at the same time, right, like I think you know being just punishing someone so hard for one mistake, I think, and potentially ruining their lives, I think might be a bit too extreme. But I think like I think a three strikes and you're out thing probably works too. Like I think,
You're mixing sports analogies.
yeah, no, I got a bunch of sports analogies, honestly.
And then we've got NBA, NFL, and now we're going to MLB.
Yeah. No, I think we're gonna. I think
Throw MLS in there and
yeah. There might be a soccer one soon. Like at some point we're gonna get to like the Marty Supreme ping pong analogies.
Geez. No.
Yeah, I actually still haven't watched the movie. I just the trailer seemed interesting. But yeah, no, maybe we'll throw in some other references too. But like I think it's just so important because I think people are more likely to understand like these point of views when it comes through with analogies because I think it really puts things into picture. But yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting debate because I think administrators would more so want to like deter this kind of practice, but I also think at the same time you kind of can create a system where students are so afraid of like doing the wrong thing or being labeled as somebody that used AI to write their assignment that like I honestly I'll admit this too, like I have found myself even adding words that aren't as academic so that like I know for sure that I can defend myself because like I honestly I tried this experiment one time. I wrote like AI did not exist at the time I wrote my college admission essays and like my like I forget what the name was it called, but like your like statement like or something. It was like it was like you have to write like a written statement for like the Common App of like colleges, like, and that's something that's submitted to all your colleges. And I wrote it about like a personal family thing and how it really changed my perspective on life. That was completely original. There's no essay that is the same as that. Like I can probably guarantee it. And AI didn't write it. I plug it into an AI detector, it says that this is likely 60 or 70% AI generated. And I was like, huh? Like, because that was written in like 2022. I don't think like AI became really widely adopted until like 2023 or something like that. To where like, I think it's just kind of amazing because it's analyzing patterns and assuming it is AI generated, but like how students write normally can just be labeled as AI generated because they're writing words of English, right? Like, I don't, I don't know if the solution is just having us write like Cantonese, but like it's just, it's,
Good luck with that.
yeah. I know, a decent amount of Mandarin, but I can't write, papers to that level. But like, that's where I think it's a bit difficult because, students have found themselves actually decreasing the quality of their papers or sounding less academic and, quote unquote, smart with their words because they're worried about the impact of that. So like I write my papers, but sometimes I'll throw in like yeah, it's really crazy how this blah blah blah, or this is
LOL.
this is or not LOL, but like this is this is this is generational because blah blah blah. And it's like I use generational when I text, like I use it when I talk. Like there's these kind of like certain words like that I think like most college students are saying at on Wake's campus, and I just throw them in there because it's like, listen, at least you can tell even by reading it that it sounds less like like an academic paper that you would submit to or it's less like a thesis that you're writing to try to do something more professional. But I think it's also something to where I just found myself doing that because it's like I know that if someone was concerned about that, I could point to that so quickly and be like, that that's how I talk, and that's how I would probably text someone, and I have tons of examples of that. So that I wrote this, and also like obviously being able to pull up edit history, being able to pull up like my notebook paper where I've like brainstormed out how I was going to write this paper. Also good examples of like in the instance if the God forbid there's an Armageddon scenario where your back is against a wall and someone's like vetting, or not vetting, but like bringing up that concern, there is this level of evidence to back up that I was the one that wrote this paper. But I think that because students in the past have tried to get away with just writing their own writing papers with AI, it has created this very like I think toxic environment where like, for example, like me and like other students have had to actually decrease their quality of writing, or to like decrease the quality of their arguments or something because they're worried that it's going to be labeled as AI.
So I'm listening to all this, and what it's sounding like is that the relationship between the students and the professors are kind of changing because of AI, and that trust factor is eroding because, I mean, at least a lot of this conversation has talked about students turning to AI for not the most positive ways, um, which does sound concerning. I want to pivot slightly, but touch on a similar topic. You were mentioning office hours at one point. And this seems like another consequence that students may not be attending office hours as much and not going directly to the professor because it feels safer to go to AI instead.
Yeah, 100%. And this was something that I was very candid about at the student panel like in this fall semester, because um I personally try to go to office hours when I can. Like I had a very great intro to psychology professor that I would go to her office hours a lot, just because I think I thought the subject matter was very interesting, but also because I think we had developed like I think like a dynamic to where I was talking to her about like some of my personal life stuff. Like I think we our families related to the fact that we both had ties to like the University of Michigan when it comes to like college sports and everything, because I was originally born in Michigan and my dad
Mhm.
went to grad school there, so there's this like connection there. And I think that's where I think there's rapport that's being developed between professors and students, to where I think students trust the professor's judgment. But I also think the reason there can be dichotomies between that is where professors are teaching the subject matter within the class and it's very confusing, and the students are worried that the explanation they're going to get in office hours is going to be the same thing, so they feel like it's a waste of time, versus they can ask AI to explain it in a way that maybe they understand, like maybe explain it like at a more simplified level, explain it in a way with this maybe this analogy or something. And I think that's also something where it's like, because it's something you can ask at like 3 a.m., like you're not emailing your professor at 3 a.m. unless, the professor's like, yeah, I'm just on my email at all times. I'll
Mhm.
answer this question. I've yet to find a professor that'll do that. because sleep's pretty important. But I think that's definitely something to where I think because AI has become this tool that is just at your hands at all times. Like yeah, like ChatGPT doesn't like turn off at 5 p.m. You can still consult it. I think it's definitely just become something to where students feel more comfortable going to AI. And I think it's also something that I think professors are worried about because, professors not being able to, meet with students in office hours is definitely, concerning trend. But I think it's something that definitely can be, addressed.
My hope, and I don't see this in the entire student body, I see it more in the students who are a little more go-getters, is that you can use the artificial intelligence to give you some personalized tutoring to get some of that basic learning out of the way. But then what that does is it frees up time for the higher level conversations with both the faculty and fellow students. So maybe some of those basic conversations that don't build the relationship as much would you can do that with artificial intelligence, and then you can go to those deeper conversations, and that's my hope, and that's where I would like to see the university and higher education go to. I don't know if I see that as much though. So I would like to see that not only with the professor and the student but other students as well, because that's something else we sometimes hear, that instead of going to a classmate and discussing an issue, that students will just turn to their favorite chatbot. I mean,
Yeah.
do you see that as well?
Yeah, I think I do. Because um, I think in this, in this day and age, I think students are also less like I think inclined to admit that they don't know what's going on. Like I think we're all just winging it and trying to act like we know what we're doing. But I think it takes a certain level of vulnerability nowadays to be like, yeah, professor, I have no idea what's going on. If I took
Mhm.
this midterm tomorrow, I'm cooked. Like, I think that's a hard thing to say for a lot of students. So I think, they're less likely because I think it can always be almost be overwhelming to feel so behind on like a certain concept in front of a professor, and it's almost like they feel like it could almost be like criticizing the professor for not teaching it in a way that they understand it. So just outsourcing it and learning it on your own, and having like Gemini or something explain it to you just makes more sense to them, like I think.
Do you think that'll translate to the real world where junior employees will not go to senior employees?
Yeah, I could fully see that becoming a trend because like I think especially in high-paced environments, it's almost like they're already thrown into the deep end. So, once you're thrown in the deep end, you either sink or swim. So like I think you can find junior level employees or entry level like analyst positions. You could have them just going home and just trying to figure it out on the fly, using AI. And the impacts that can have can, be either, fine or, it could be interesting. Like I think you see jokes being made, on, social media about like, when when you're about to go into surgery and you find out that your best friend is the neurosurgeon on your specific case, and they got through med school just using ChatGPT. Like, I think that's definitely like something that I think people joke about, but also would be concerned about. Like, if they're getting consulted about like, potential terminal illness and they're like, oh, hold on, let me check. Let me ask ChatGPT what it says. You got like 4 to 6 weeks to live or something. Like, yeah, that's what chat says here. And it's like that might not be as ideal. But I think it also is like, I think ChatGPT and like other AI things can elevate people's understanding of material to where maybe the next generation of doctors are even more well equipped and adaptable to modern circumstances, because like I think there's going to be a certain level of automation in every professional industry in the future, most likely, right? Like I think I've even heard about it from like people that are like lawyers right now. Like there's certain level of like case briefings and like discovery that's happening that's being deferred to
Mhm.
automation and like AI generated tasks. But there are certain level of things that still won't be replaced by AI at the moment, like I think it'd be hard for AI to, defend, somebody's client in a court of law right now. But that's not to say that it won't be possible in the future. So like I think that's why I think it's so important to continue to have like, machine learning and stuff, and to have people develop this skill, because I think it is a skill that will be used by professional like industries, and just like by companies, and whether or not you have it or not, they don't really care. They just care about making money. And, that's why I think it's actually becoming like a requirement, like on most like applications. Like,
Okay, so stick on that thread. This is your last semester, correct?
yes.
You're on track to graduate.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
You told a story about interviewing. That was really interesting. Interviewing with AI. Tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah. So it was crazy. There was like a company that I was interviewing for, and they decided to just have like an AI like chatbot, like, kind of do the interview. Like it would spew out questions. I would like talk into the mic, and it would, internalize my answer and then move on to the next question. And
How
for
did that feel?
it just felt weird. Like I always have been used to interviews with like face to face, and there's also been like higher views where they just like ask you a question, and you like record your answer and
Yeah.
then submit it. But it just felt different, because it was having a dialogue, but like with like AI, and it was
Did it
like
feel like a natural conversation?
not
No.
really. Like it kind of it's saying like, "Oh, thanks, Alexander, for that answer.
Did it
Next question,
did it
please."
impact at all like your desire for that job or like working for that company?
For me, I think perceptually, I think it made me think like, because I think higher views are very standard, and I think I
Mhm.
understand that. But I think to me, it still gives off the general sentiment, that this is a company that is getting a lot of applications, and they're
Mhm.
just choosing not to put in the human capital and investment to
Hmm.
interview these candidates. So like if you get to the next stage, yeah, you'll get, the in-person interview, or maybe the Zoom interview or something. But I think about it as like it's almost, yeah, you're just one of a thousand at
Yeah,
that
you're
point.
just a
Like they're
cog. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you're not in any way special. And I wouldn't say that I'm, a special applicant in any way, but I think it's like, yeah, I think it's something to where people are now finding ways to outsource their professional responsibilities. Like I think normally that would be somebody that's like maybe like an analyst or something that is interviewing and seeing if they're fit for something similar.
If
But
that
yeah.
voice agent sounded and felt more real, would you have a better perception? I mean, I've used voice agents. I've built voice agents, and the conversation has felt a lot more natural. I could pretty much tell it was still, AI, but it felt fairly natural. Do you think if you just thought this was a phone interview and you weren't completely sure as AI, would that have changed your feelings about it?
I think potentially, yeah. I think I
Interesting.
think yeah, no, I think there is something about that human element
Yeah.
that I think
Mhm.
makes things feel more
Makes you
tangible.
felt more important.
Yeah, 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 no, not yeah, tangible, but also feels like you're giving yourself an opportunity in that interview to change
Yeah.
somebody's, point of
Mhm.
view or opinion, right?
Interesting.
Because I think resumes are one thing, but like, I think being able to understand someone's personality can really make the difference between one candidate or the other. Like if, you
Yeah.
know, resumes are similar, accomplishments are similar, experience is similar, but the main deciding factor is who would I rather work with? Like I think that's where some candidates end up, earning the job over the other person. And I think that should be, I think something, maybe I'm biased because I feel like somebody that, if, they were to work with me in a professional setting, I think, they would find themselves, feeling like, I'm somebody that, is easy to talk to, and also, will definitely, give them the time of day with a conversation, regardless of how busy I am. But I think that's also something that doesn't come across with just a resume. And I feel like having to just give my answers based on, a AI chatbot or whatever that's replying to me, it's like Siri isn't picking up on my tone at all. Or maybe they are, I don't know. Like, but like that's not something that I feel like will feel as fulfilling. Like in the moment, right? Like it's not, I'm not feeling like in an in-person interview, I feel like people are reading your behavior. They're almost
Hmm.
psychoanalyzing you and coming up with their determination about whether or not this person knows what they're talking about, if there's somebody that's, this personality type, or if they're funny, they're smart, etc. I don't think AI chatbots, unless you ask them to like make like a full-on like description based on the maybe the transcript of the conversation, they can come up with some things. But like I think tone and like energy is very important. And I think if you're not um if you're not getting that across with those interviews, I think it really takes away from certain individuals.
So the lesson learned here is if you want this Wake Forest superstar to come lead your company, come interview Alex in person.
Thanks again to our guest, and thanks for listening to the Deeks.ai podcast. Please continue to follow the AI discussion by subscribing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you have any comments, questions, or would like to join the discussion, please email us at deeks.ai@wfu.edu.